So, good morning, everybody. I think in a football language, this is the Champions League final, what we usually call the today in the life of our academy, because we have really smart, brilliant students here, and thank you for coming. And we have unbelievably distinguished scientists here who can show you role models. Today here there is a discussion with the university students, and we will go after there to the Pick Arena, where mostly the secondary school students will be. We have students here from all over the world who are at either undergraduate or postgraduate level. And let me introduce to you guys today's guests. First of all, I would like to very welcome Randy Schekman, Nobel Laureate from the USA. Thank you. Second, I would like to introduce Naomi Ellemers from Holland, from Utrecht. I also very welcome Morad from the USA, who is with us today. We have Francis Chen from the Chinese University of Hong Kong. Welcome, Francis. And the rest of us, you already seen before, András Varró, the chair of the curatorial board of the National Academy of Scientists Education. Zoltán Rakoncai, he is the director of the university level program. And by myself, as you most probably know, I am Peter Hegyi. I am the program director of the National Academy of Scientists Education. So, thank you. So now the stage is yours. This is a time to ask questions, and if there is anything you would like to ask, that's free. But before we go, maybe a brief welcome to the students from the audience. Maybe we can start, and no, maybe we can start from there. Francis, how do you feel yourself in Hungary?
Right. In fact, this is my first time coming to this city, although I've been to Hungary a few times before. I believe I am a minority here, although I notice quite a few Asians here. I'm from Hong Kong. I'm a practicing clinician. I'm still seeing patients. My special interest is in digestive diseases. That's why I call myself a gastroenterologist. So over the last so many years before you were born, I have evolved from a purely clinician specializing in digestive diseases, doing endoscopy, to then focusing on clinical research about endoscopy, and lately I'm doing translational research. But the most important thing I consider myself is I try to differentiate between research and innovation, because later on you'll realize that I believe research will generate a lot of new knowledge, new discoveries, which are extremely important. But how can we translate our research into innovations that can really bridge unmet societal need? This is something that is really challenging, and this is something that I'm trying to do.
Thank you, Francis. Martin.
It's too early for me to be coherent, but I'll try. I'm a basic scientist. I've always believed in fundamental science. I always say to my clinical colleagues, in order to have translational science, you have to have fundamental science. And somebody asked me once, why did you go into science? And my answer was, I like secrets. And the greatest secrets are all hidden in the biological organisms and biological mechanisms. And I have had one hell of a wonderful time searching for those secrets. And I love seeing all of you here. This is my second trip in this organization that Peter and my good friend Andros have put together. And I love being here. I love seeing you all so excited about science and an opening for future. It gives me hope that mankind is not going to destroy itself. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Naomi.
Hello, I'm perhaps a little bit different from my colleagues. I'm a social and behavioral scientist. I was trained as a social psychologist. And not all psychologists work with people who are depressed or anxious. Psychologists also do research. And in our research, we examine how people work together, what makes it difficult to work together, why people have polarized opinions in society, and how perhaps to resolve that. How people can be motivated to work in a different way. And also part of my research is on how people develop their careers and what are difficulties that they encounter when developing their careers. And these are, I think, questions that you're all concerned with. But what you perhaps don't all realize is that you can do scientific research about these issues. And it's also an area of science that you can specialize in, and you can collect data about it, and you can understand how it works and try to improve it. And even with all the medical advances and technological advances, we know that if people are reluctant to adopt these advances, or if people are reluctant to change their behavior, they will not benefit from the new scientific knowledge. So it's very much my mission to talk about my discipline, to tell people about this area of science that many of you may not be aware of just as much as you're aware of the biomedical sciences or the hard sciences, like we call them. And my mission is to tell people there's nothing soft about the way people work together. We can examine it just as we can examine anything else. And some of the biggest problems in the world today are related to those behavioral and social issues. And I'm very excited about young people who are willing to help study these issues and try to resolve them. So I'm hoping to inspire some of you today.
Thank you very much, Naomi.
So I would like to welcome all of you from the behalf of our academy, and I have one single comment that you should keep in mind, and I would like to encourage you to ask as many questions as it is possible within the time which we will have in this session. And you should know that from your side, as early career people, there are no stupid questions. Maybe from our part, who are experienced science, there are no appropriate answers. So just be free to ask any question which you have.
Thank you very much. So like Martin, I too am a basic scientist. And this afternoon when I speak, you'll hear about the origins of my work and what impact it had quite unexpectedly. As a basic scientist, I'm often called on to justify the work that I do, the investment that the government in the US made in my work. And it's a difficult task unless there's some obvious practical application. But it doesn't often happen that there's going to be a practical application of the discoveries. But one of the great examples that I'm sure you've heard of are advances in genome editing, where it's now possible to develop treatments for cures, basically cures of genetic inborn errors of metabolism and other diseases. It's been possible recently to treat patients who have sickle cell anemia and to basically cure them. So the power of basic science that came from quite unexpected origins is manifest in clinical science. You may not know that the origins of the work that led to these genome editing tools called CRISPR, you've certainly heard that term, was work over decades by microbiologists, two of whom worked at a yogurt company, to discover how bacterial viruses and the bacteria they infect fight against each other. This has been an ongoing evolutionary battle for 3 billion years since the bacteria first emerged on Earth. One of the tools that bacteria have used was to create an enzyme, to evolve an enzyme that could be programmed with a small piece of RNA to degrade foreign bacterial virus infections of the bacteria. Once we understood the basic mechanism of that using bacterial genetics and biochemistry, it became obvious that this was going to be a tool of great power, and now it's the beginning of an explosion in genome editing. This is just one of many examples. So you, as you proceed in your studies, will have to also convey that message. The investment in basic science here in Hungary and in your careers going forward is essential for the industrial development of this country, as it has been over many years in the United States. So this is a challenge for you. Good luck.
Thank you.
Good morning, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. I'm also a basic scientist, working on the physiology and pathophysiology of the pancreas, and my special interest is in acute pancreatitis, working in animal models and hopefully translating the science to humans as well. I'm also currently working on with Peter to establish the translational medicine program here in Szeged, since I think this is the future to get PhD students involved in science, and hopefully we'll get this set up by September. Thank you.
Thank you, Soli. So you can see that we have a variety of people here, discovery scientists, translational researchers, physician scientists, social scientists, everything. So the stage is yours. Ask a question and also tell who do you want to get an answer. So the stage is yours.
Thank you very much. I would like to have a question for Professor Schekman. I have seen that you are one of the board members of the New Frontiers Foundation. Could you share with us some insights? What are the goals of this foundation and how this new institute would be integrated into the Hungarian research environment?
Happy to. We have, is it tomorrow? Tomorrow is we lay the cornerstone for the new building that will go up in Budapest. Well, this is really, when Ferenc, Krausz invited me, I was quite excited because I'd been to Hungary before. Peter, the impresario here, invited me, and we had a quite enjoyable, my wife and I had quite enjoyable visit 2 years ago. So when he invited me, I thought this is a great opportunity to build a scientific powerhouse here in Hungary. So I have the opportunity to travel around the world, to visit with nations that are still building a scientific infrastructure, and Hungary is another example. All too often, I've seen in other countries where, although there has been an investment in the primary, secondary, and college education of their most talented students, some of whom choose to go on in science, they don't then make the final step of investing in a significant research infrastructure to which these students could be attracted and remain in their country. I had a formative experience a few years ago when I visited Turkey, where there was a symposium in Istanbul, and they had invited prominent young Turkish scientists to make presentations for an award. Of the 7 young scientists, every one of them was doing their science abroad. None of them had come back to Turkey to make their career there because there was an insufficient investment in that required infrastructure. So this is what the Frontiers program will be. It will be a very significant investment of the Hungarian government in building not just basic, but some translational research into a beautiful new facility with young scholars who will be invited back or who have risen up within Hungary to establish a significant career competitive with the kinds of careers that they might have if they went to Western Europe or to North America. That's the promise, and that's the vision that Ferenc Krausz has developed and which I share.
Thank you. Other questions?
Thank you. My question would be if you ever experienced imposter syndrome in your work with others, and if so, then how did you deal with it?
I'm happy to answer that. Here's an imposter. Yes, and I think imposter syndrome, thank you for that question. I think it's a very important one. We see it also as a mark of ambition when people have imposter syndrome. So it is typically associated with perfectionism, perhaps the desire to do very well, but also the suspicion that other people are better prepared than you are or know better what they're doing than you are. And it's very difficult to not to be discouraged by that. What we discovered in the research, but also what I discovered in the course of my career, is that sometimes people who speak in a very assertive and very confident manner, they don't necessarily know better what they're talking about. But you might be fooled by that, right? And so you might think you're the only person in the room who isn't sure, or the only person in the room who find it difficult to disagree with what's being said. And what we usually see also when we do this type of research is that when the first person speaks up and says, well, actually I don't understand what's going on here, or I don't really know what to do here, you see a sigh of relief in the room, because perhaps everybody is thinking this, but nobody wants to be the first person to raise their hand. And so you're raising your hand to ask this question, and perhaps raising your hand in a room full of people who look self-confident, and be the first person to ask a question or to say, I don't understand this, or I disagree, makes you feel like an imposter. But I think it is really a mark of having a curious mind and wanting to know what things are really like, wanting to understand what's really going on, instead of, keeping your mouth shut and pretending that you know it already, which is probably what 80% of the other people are doing at the moment. So it's helpful to recognize it as a phenomenon that is described in the scientific literature. And like I said, it's a mark of high ambition, and don't be fooled by all these self-assured people around you, because they are questioning their own abilities just like you are.
Thank you. Questions?
So my question is mostly to you, Francis Chen. Thank you for being here. I have a question. I'm a gynecology resident in Vienna, and I sometimes struggle with the duality of being like a clinician and a scientist, and of sometimes feeling like you try to be everything at once and not being enough in in single aspects of that. Maybe you could speak to that.
Good question. My simple answer is you can't do everything at one time. When we said clinician scientist, in fact, this is something that can kind of fool a lot of people, because it doesn't mean that you can be a practicing clinician at the same time you spend a lot of your time in the laboratory doing basic science research. So from my experience, I guess you have to go through different stages. First, if you are a resident gynecologist or a specialist in whatever field, you have to master your clinical skills. You have to attain your required specialist qualification in order to understand, to treat patients. Because as a clinician, I myself, I believe the greatest satisfaction is to deal with patients, to handle their problems, to relieve their sufferings. But during this process, we clinicians can identify the unmet needs. We have cutting-edge science, we have advanced technology, new treatments every day, but still there are a lot of unmet needs in terms of the patient's requirements. We are the one who recognize the unmet need, and the question is, how are we going to bridge these unmet needs? We need research, and therefore, by the time you believe you have got this strong desire to address these unmet needs, you go to your research stage. You can start off with clinical research, doing clinical research from simple case series, case control studies, meta-analysis, randomized controlled trials. That's something I've been doing some 20 years ago, published in top-notch journals. Then you ask yourself, are these clinical studies good enough to address all these problems? Then you want to ask deeper questions. What are the reasons behind these problems? Why treatment A is better than treatment B? Can we devise treatment C, which is even better than them? Then you go for different stages of translational and even basic science research. So to summarize, I believe what you need to do is you go by your heart. Now you believe being a clinician is something that you think is your top priority. Be a good clinician. At the same time, try to work with people, scientists, translational researchers, to try to exchange your ideas or opinion with them. Later on, if the opportunity comes, you may decide whether you want to change your path to become a scientist, whether a translational or basic scientist. So this is really my advice.
Other questions?
Thank you. So nowadays we can hear a lot about the raising of artificial intelligence. So my questions would be that how does AI affect on your work, and what do you think that in the future how AI will change your research work? Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mer. Somebody would like to?
Okay, talking from my own area of science, my biggest concern is that AI is not just being used to support human intelligence, but to replace some of the functions that we develop, and that we forget how to use our own minds to do that. And I think the word artificial intelligence is misplaced, actually, because it's not an intelligence like human intelligence. It works completely different. It's not a correct analogy. And so my biggest concern is not to be fooled by it, but to use it as a tool and not as a replacement of human judgment.
Yeah, certainly as a tool, it's already powerful. In biochemistry, my own subject, it's now possible, I think many of you know, to, if you're working on a particular protein, to predict what its structure is. Whereas in the past, it took sometimes decades to be able to solve experimentally the atomic resolution structure of a large protein molecule or a complex. It's now possible through an algorithm created by a company called DeepMind in London, AlphaFold 2 specifically in advanced forms, to predict the structure of any protein that ever existed on Earth through the sequencing of genomes. It's even possible now with another algorithm to design a protein that never existed on Earth to perform a particular function. This is an incredible tool that people who are not structural biologists avail themselves of to ask more precise questions about the molecules they're working on. So I'm not frightened of AI, at least not yet. It's been an enormous advance of powerful impact.
Thank you. Yes.
First of all, thank you for taking your time, for attending and giving us all this beautiful insight. I would like to ask you a question. What do you think that the future generation, for future scientists, what do you think that there is a really question that is intriguing for you, and would you like the future generation to ask and to find the answer for.
I think the answer is that AI will decide for you what the future generation should do. I think if you consider the history of human development in sciences and in literature, nobody really could predict where the major breakthroughs came out of. Sometimes it came out of things, as Professor Schekman said, looking at yogurt, the bacteria has been doing this for millions of years. I think that, in my opinion, and that's a minor opinion, is that scientists should not be scared of these new developments, whether it's AI or whether it's gene editing or whether it is, some laser new technology that nobody can figure out. It's just a technology. Use it. My personal career, I think I've used 6, 7 different technologies that I had no idea about them. I was interested in the problem. And then how you solve the problem is somebody said, well, use such thing. So you learn how to use it. The central issue is not to be scared. Not to say, no, I'm not an electrophysiologist, I cannot look at that. Or, no, I'm not a biochemist, I don't know how to do structural biology. No. Just look to solve the problem.
So let me give you an interesting analogy that speaks to what I would be doing if I were in your position in looking forward to a career in basic science. And that is, I think, exploring the human mind is the frontier. We know so little. And here's an interesting comparison that was given to me by a colleague. It's now, AI is, the consumption of power by AI is so vast that Microsoft has purchased a decommissioned nuclear power plant to generate enough energy for the, all of their cloud coverage that they need, that they anticipate in the future. And yet, if you compare that to the power consumption for the human mind, it's an incredible difference. The human brain operates with the power equivalent to a 20-watt light bulb. So when we figure out how to harness AI with that much more limited power consumption, we will have made a tremendous advance. And that will require understanding how the human brain works. The human brain consists of tens of billions of nerve cells with an estimated over 1 trillion different nerve connections, informing all processes of memory and behavior and emotions. When we understand that, we will really capture the imagination not only of the public, but we will be making fundamental discoveries that cannot even be anticipated now.
Well, I believe as university students, you have plenty of opportunities ahead, but you really can't decide at the present moment what you really want to do or what your future will be like, because simply we don't have any crystal ball. Like myself, I have been evolving from a clinician to a clinical researcher to a translational researcher, and now I'm an entrepreneur. So if I ask myself some 30 years ago, could I predict my evolution as such? No, in no way can I do so. So what should you do, or what did I do? I look for opportunities. So whatever you do in your present moment, in your present position, you need to do your very best. Once you do your very best, you will see new opportunities open up because people will recognize your hard work. People will recognize how different you are from the rest of your peers. So people will offer you new opportunities. By then, you can decide whether I should take opportunity A or B or C. So I guess this is the way you should move forward. Whether you want to become a basic scientist, a clinician, or something else, I guess what you need to do now is do your best at your present position, and then new doors will open for you.
Good morning. First of all, I want to thank Peter for this opportunity to meet these successful persons and Nobel-awarded persons like you. My question is, as a PhD student, we face many challenges and obstacles each day. So what's failure teach you the most in your scientific career that we could learn our lesson from? So it's a general question. Thank you.
Yeah, I think perhaps following up on the prior question, usually failure is set up for a new question or a new insight. And so I think a lot of science is not about finding right answers, but about remaining curious and asking the right questions or pursuing the things that you want to understand. And then usually failure, if you think like a failed experiment or a failed study or a failed line of research, usually if you consider it further, you realize that it opens up new research questions and new ideas of how things could work differently from what you anticipated. What you do need to overcome that is some measure of self-confidence, that the failure doesn't tell you that you've done something wrong, but perhaps your ideas were not as developed or the equipment was not doing what you expected it to do. And so then failure can be very informative. I think science that only confirms predictions that we already developed before doing studies, it's very boring and it will not keep you occupied for your whole career.
Thank you.
Thank you. I also have a question. No, I have a question to you guys. Put your hands up. Who would like to have success in their life? Put your hands up. Brilliant. Okay, next question. Who would like to have failure? Put your hands up. Much less. So the secret is if you would like to be more successful, you have to double your failure rate. Because the only way to success, it's exactly the same way like to get a failure. The only difference between the failure and success that you don't stop. I always, when the students come to me that my paper is rejected, I start with congratulations. That brilliant. And they don't understand. Brilliant, because you have a very good question. It's not fully answered. You get plus information. You can revise it, you can get it better, and you can go forward. So if you want to be successful, you have to elevate your failure rate.
So I would like to address a question to Professor Martin Morad. Along with several other titles, you hold the title of Professor of Bioengineering at the University of Clemson. We hear a lot of things about the AI revolution, but if we actually want to be part of the AI revolution, what should we pay attention to in order to implement AI as a part of life and biomedical sciences in general?
I'm not so sure that I have really the wisdom to answer the depth of your question. But I think that AI is just a tool, as far as I'm concerned. It is another slide rule, is another little computer. it is very powerful. And if artificial intelligence goes to the way that we think is going to proceed, where it is superhuman intelligence, then, of course, not too many of us going to be competing with it. But in the process, use it. Don't be scared of it. I think if you were not scared of what Professor Schekman said about the brain, which is, it scares the hell out of me, I can tell you that. You know, these trillions of neurons with the trillions of connection making in there, and yet we have the audacity to study them on a single neurons and looking at the transmitter release and the kinetics of it and nature of it. So it's like a dark room, a big dark room with a lot of toys in it, and you throw a little kid in and say, go find your favorite toy. Well, my advice to you, or to all of you, is that not to be scared of the technology. It's just another God-blessed tool. And use it, and through it you may discover. In my own career, I think I've had 6 technologies that I've used I knew nothing about. I was never trained for it. I always feel unprepared, even to this day. I feel that I wasn't properly trained for this technology. Yet I've used it, and my colleagues tell me, geez, Martin, how did you come up with it, discovering that you could measure cardiac action potential using a photo-optical dye? Well, it was just silly. I think, let yourself go. Be interested in the problem, right? You say, I'm going to solve this problem. If I can't use this technique, I can ask so-and-so to help me out.
I'm not sure if you recently read an article published by a scientist from Imperial College London. This scientist used 3 completely different models of AI to help tackle the current geopolitical tension, war affairs. And there are quite a few options, including the use of nuclear weapon, the option of peace. And surprisingly, the outcome shows that all 3 different independent AI models said the solution to this problem is the use of nuclear weapon. So if we believe AI can solve our problem, if we believe AI will be the solution to our future, then we'll end up in nothing. So I guess after all, the humanity quality, regardless of how AI evolves, is still the most important.
Okay, more questions.
So good morning, everybody. I'm also grateful for the opportunity to be here. So we were talking about, or you were talking about questions about self-identity and work. I may stay on that track with my question. So my question would be to anybody who would like to answer. And how do you view self-marketing in connection with work and research in the world of endless connections and being represented by social media and etc.? Thank you.
Naomi, I think the stage is yours.
Okay, I'll try to say something. What I always tell my students is it's important to find a balance between if you are a scientist, then your business is science. It's the science that counts. It's not you that counts in the end. But you shouldn't be naive about how things work. So if you have a brilliant idea or a brilliant discovery and nobody knows what it is, or nobody knows that it was you, then it's not going to do anybody any good. So I think the trick is to find a balance there. So to be aware of people need to know who you are, people need to know what you've done, but to be careful that it doesn't become a goal in its own right. And even coming back to one of the previous questions of what should I study, I've spoken to so many students who said, okay, what's the best technology, or what is the best research question, or what's the best journal to get published in? And I think that's the wrong question. The question is, like Professor Morad said, it's your own research question that should be driving that. And so you should be doing what you want to be doing, because the result is never certain. And so even if the result is not what you would hoped for, at least you want to do things that you find meaningful, you find important. And if you are enthusiastic about them, you will want to tell the world about them. And that would be the motivation that you would be seeking. And so don't be self-promoting hot air, and don't be naive about not telling people what you're working on, because science is also communicating about ideas and challenging people's ideas and telling people what you found and finding out what their critique is, what you might address better. So the dialogue, seeking a dialogue, if that's the goal of your self-promotion, then that's fine. But if it's promoting yourself, just to promote yourself, perhaps you need to find a different profession.
Let me tell you about a very simple tool that I didn't appreciate until I began my independent career at Berkeley, and that is the power of teaching. So I was a graduate student in a medical school department, and I had no exposure to undergraduates. And when I got to Berkeley, and suddenly I was thrust in front of hundreds of students, bright students, who needed to learn about biochemistry or basic biology, I was frankly ill-equipped to communicate effectively at their level, to share my enthusiasm in a way that they could appreciate. And so over the years, I think the biggest benefit I've had of being at a large public university like Berkeley is the exposure to undergraduates, which has sharpened my ability to communicate and to share my enthusiasm in a way that they can understand and appreciate. At least many of them can. I find that some of my colleagues who don't have exposure to undergraduates, who are basically, for instance, primarily teaching at medical schools where they aren't exposed to lots of naive young minds, are often not as well equipped to communicate their own research in a professional setting, because they have not developed the kind of empathy with the audience that I feel I had the advantage of at teaching undergraduates. You will all, at some level, be called on to teach, to instruct. This is an opportunity for you to sharpen your skills in communication.
Questions?
Good morning, and thanks for this opportunity. My question is how to keep motivated during all the research journey and not to reach the burnout. Of course, for anyone who would like to answer.
Actually, I just have a short comment. I think motivation is extremely important to start, but motivation cannot be kept, in my opinion. You cannot be motivated every morning when you wake up. It's impossible, for me at least. But what you can do to have commitment, and try to take away commitment, your work and your motivation. So when you get up and you committed, you can go through any kind of situation, either you are motivated or not motivated. So I think motivation is good to start, but you have to have a commitment and a curiosity to answer the problem, like Martin Morad also said, to go for the problem without stopping and without feeling that you are out. No, others?
Yeah, so in my area of science, there's a very specific definition of burnout, so perhaps I can share it with you. And it is not about working hard or working many hours. That's not really related to the experience or the diagnosis of burnout. Burnout occurs in workplaces when people feel that they have no control over the things that they feel responsible for, and when people are very committed to their patients or to their students but don't have the resources to deliver what they would like to deliver. It also happens when people feel undervalued for the work that they're putting in. And so a lot of the burnout conditions actually are not located in the person themselves, but are located in the work environment. And so usually what we see if people suffer from burnout, it doesn't say a lot about the individual resilience or the individual motivation or the individual ability to work very hard. It is usually, it's a sign of great commitment in a context, in a work context that's not very supportive. And so if that is something that you encounter, the biggest lesson is not to doubt your own motivation or your own ability to work hard or your own commitment, but to seek a work environment that facilitates that better.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
I think we still have time for one or two more questions.
Thank you very much for being here today. My question would be to Professor Francis Chan. Nowadays we see a lot of early onset gastrointestinal diseases, for example, colorectal cancer and inflammatory diseases. What do you think is the best way to tackle this problem in younger people using our new technological advances? May it be personalized medicine or new diagnostic procedures?
Well, this is a highly specialized question. I thought this is not a gastroenterology conference. But to answer your question, yes, we are seeing more and more young onset neoplastic disease like colorectal cancer, inflammatory bowel disease all over the world. In Asia, it's kind of exponential increase. First of all, we need to understand the underlying mechanisms, why there's a shift from the west to the east. I myself is very much into the gut microbiome. I believe the change in the gut microbiome is really one of the most important factors that leads to this change in the disease epidemiology. Because we don't expect genetic changes, genomic changes of our human body can account for such exponential increase in the disease incidence. So what can we do? In clinical terms, definitely we want to look for more advanced tools for early diagnosis. We have got more advanced imaging system. At the same time, we also have more advanced non-invasive diagnostic tests. For example, we can make use of now the microbial markers to make early detection of these inflammatory conditions and also colorectal cancer. In terms of treatment, yes, if we can detect these conditions early, we can aim at cure. But what are the new advances in treatment? Certainly, we've got new drugs, new biologics, but at the same time, I do believe that if we can modulate the gut microbiome, we will be able to offer better health and change the fate of these people. Because I always believe that the human genome is very important, but it only accounts for 1% of the total bodily genome. Technically, we may be able to modify some of the human genome, but it's technically demanding. There are also ethical issues. But if we are able to modulate the gut microbiome, we might be able to change the health outcome and improve the treatment outcome. So this is something that a lot of people are trying to work along this line.
Thank you. I think there were...
Thank you, everyone, for this wonderful opportunity. And my question is to Professor Chan. Being an entrepreneur, as well as being a researcher and a clinician, how challenging it is? And what is your suggestion for young people in their early career, do you suggest to start it early, the experiment on entrepreneurships, or later in their life?
Do I have 3 days to answer your question? Well, it's interesting. I believe for a lot of young people, they want to become entrepreneur for various reasons. But to me, I guess the most fundamental question you want to ask yourself, why do you want to become an entrepreneur? If your aim is to become rich, then forget it. Most entrepreneurs fail. I would say 98% failed. So you need to have a dream. For example, like myself, my dream is to bring health and hope to our younger generation through our research and development. So once you have got this whole idea, you will be able to gather a group of people who share your enthusiasm. Because you need teamwork. You yourself may be good at a certain field, but like myself, I'm a very experienced clinician. I believe I'm good at clinical and a bit of translational research, but I have no idea about business. So if I do business, I'm doomed to fail. So I need to work with people who share my enthusiasm and who are good at doing business. So what I'm doing is I do my upstream R&D work, and I rely on my partners to do the downstream business development. And at the same time, you have to go through a lot of failures, like Peter said. The more failures you encounter, the better you know how to navigate these difficult waters. This is going to be a lot of fun. If time allows, I'll kind of talk to you in person.
Thank you.
There's more question. Yeah.
So thank you so much, everyone, for having the time to have this discussion for all of us. So my question is for all of you. As me and many of my colleagues here at different stages in our early careers, how important mentorship was for you, and how important do you think the surrounding environment can play a role in deciding your future direction? Thank you.
Okay, I think.
You've hit on a very important point that I think probably each of us has benefited from in different ways. I had the blessing of mentors at every stage in my youth, from high school through university, through graduate school, and even in my independent career. At each stage I've had a different mentor who showed me the way in ways that I had not really been prepared to develop myself. Even in high school, I had a biology teacher who nurtured my interest. And in university, I had the experience of working in a research lab very early on, and that changed my life completely and what I had aspired to do. In graduate school, I studied with a very prominent Nobel Laureate, one of the great biochemists of his generation. He was tough. He was tough as nails. But from him, I learned the precise tools and approaches that really made my career possible. And even then, later, when I had an opportunity to have a faculty position, the chairman of the biochemistry department who hired me showed me the way to be a citizen of science, and not merely to be selfish in doing my own work, but to care about my colleagues, to care about my institution, and to care about science broadly. So having good mentors is essential. So make good choices when you find a mentor with whom you have common goals and common approaches. For me, it's made the entire difference in my career.
Yeah, perhaps I might add to that. So the two examples provided by Professor Schekman also elucidate that perhaps it cannot be a single person who performs all these different mentoring roles. And so, on the one hand, I think, yes, everybody needs a mentor, and also all the people who seem to be doing it all by themselves. I'm sure they all have mentors in different ways, but we don't always recognize them, or don't always name them as such. And so some of us may find difficulty finding mentors or finding suitable role models, and so taking different properties from different people is one way to solve that. And when you think about it, you can have people who coach you, who tell you what to do, but perhaps you don't want to see them as role models because you don't want to be the person that they are, because you think, they're very good at their job, but they're not very nice people. So you don't have to take everything from everybody. Somebody else might be your sponsor, might be pulling you up or putting you forward. And it could be your friends at some point, or your partner, or your mother, fulfilling these different roles. So it is super important to have mentors, but also remember that different people can fulfill different roles, and so collect the different types of support that you need. And it's not necessarily all located in the same individual.
I very much agree with Naomi about mentorship. You could have a mentor who can destroy you, or you could have a mentor who will make you the best scientist you are. So often students, at least in my years at Georgetown University in Washington, student would ask me, which lab should I go to? Whom should I work with? It's a very important question because it really makes you. And if you don't have Nobel laureates around, so it's difficult to choose. So my answer always was, stay away from popular guys. Look to see what this mentor has published recently. What has he done that has, he published it in Nature or in Science. And what did his students do? Often, and I think one of my heroes, scientific heroes, was Sir Andrew Huxley, the Hodgkin-Huxley giant axon. And what amazed me about people that went to work with him, no one that I know of ever even came close to his creativity. So it's critical when you decide, you have to be prepared to take over a giant, right? So you don't want to be crushed by the intellect or ability of your mentor. You want to have him support you. And I often, if you look at great men of science, they don't breed a lot of good scientists. The good scientists come from different corners with mentors that never really amounted much themselves. So, in my opinion, there's time when you're ready to work with a Nobel laureate. There's a time to work with Martin Morad.
Well, I guess I won't dispute the importance of mentorship. If you are able to find a good mentor, people like saying, standing on the shoulder of giants, great. But if you can't find any good mentor, I would say even better. Even better. Why? Because I speak from my own experience. I was a nobody. I grew up in a very difficult environment. I didn't have the luxury. I didn't have the luxury to have any good mentorship. But throughout the process, I realized the importance of building self-resilience, identify people who share my same dream, and build a team. Certainly, observing different successful people, using them as role models will be important. If you were unable to find people like Randy, Nobel Laureates to be your mentor, but don't despair. If you can't find, I would say congratulations.
Thank you very much. And I think we reached the final stage because we have to go to the Pick Arena.